They want me to talk about it now. 47 years later, and they think I can just talk about it. Like it's history, like it's something that happened to someone else. I was 19 in the summer of 1916. Just a boy, really, though I thought I was a man. We all did. I'd enlisted in 1915, caught up in all that fever. King and country, do your bit, the war will be over by Christmas. My mum cried when I left, but I was too excited to care much. I remember thinking she just didn't understand. That generation never did, I thought. I was with the 8th Battalion, East Surrey Regiment. We trained at Purfleet, then Dover. Basic stuff. Drill, marching, shooting. They taught us how to advance in formation, how to fix bayonets, how to dig trenches. What they didn't teach us was how to die, or how to watch your mates die, or how to keep living after. We shipped out to France in May of 16. The reality started setting in then, in those training camps behind the lines. You could hear the guns, constant, like thunder that never stopped. At night, the sky would light up, orange and red, flickering like some sort of hellfire. The older lads, the ones who'd been at Loos or Ypres, they had this look in their eyes. We didn't understand it then. By late June, we were in the trenches near Beaumont-Hamel. That's when I met the lads I'd go over the top with. There was Charlie Watson, a carpenter from Essex. Always had a joke, always kept our spirits up. And Jimmy Patterson, quiet Scottish lad, barely 18. We shared cigarettes, wrote letters home together, complained about the rats and the lice and the mud. They told us about the big push coming, said we'd been shelling the German lines for a week straight. Said nothing could survive that bombardment. Said we'd walk right through, that it would break the stalemate, that we'd be home by autumn. We wanted to believe them. God, how we wanted to believe them. July 1st, 1916, 7:30 in the morning. I can still see it. The sky was clear, almost beautiful. Sunny. Wrong sort of day for what was about to happen. We'd been up since before dawn, checking our kit, writing last letters. Some of the lads were sick with nerves, throwing up in the corner of the trench. Others were silent, smoking cigarette after cigarette. Charlie tried to keep things light, made some joke about taking Berlin by tea time. Nobody laughed much. They gave us rum, standard issue courage, they called it. Tasted like petrol, but you drank it anyway. Anything to stop the shaking in your hands. The bombardment had been going on for 7 days. 7 days of constant shelling. We'd been told nothing could survive it, that the German defenses would be obliterated, that the barbed wire would be cut to ribbons. Looking back now, Christ, the lies we were fed. At 7:20, the bombardment reached a crescendo. The noise was beyond description. Not just sound. It was physical, pressing against your chest, making your teeth rattle. The ground shook. Officers were shouting orders, but you could barely hear them. 7:28. Captain Henderson blew his whistle for us to fix bayonets. The metallic click as we locked them on. That sound still makes me flinch. 7:30. The whistle. That damned whistle. Over the top, lads, for king and country. I climbed the ladder. My legs didn't feel like my own. Charlie was beside me, Jimmy just ahead. We emerged into sunlight and smoke and noise, and the machine guns opened up immediately. That's what I remember most. Not gradually, not after a few seconds, immediately. They'd been waiting. Of course they'd been waiting. 7 days of warning we'd given them. Men started falling before they'd taken 5 steps, just dropping, like someone had cut their strings. I saw Private Morrison, a butcher's boy from Colchester, his head just gone. 1 second there, the next just red mist. We were supposed to advance in waves, walking pace, keeping formation. Walking. They told us to walk into machine gun fire, said it would be more orderly. I ran. We all ran. Training went out the window the moment you saw what was happening. You just moved, some animal instinct taking over. The noise. God, the noise. Screaming, men screaming, shells screaming, machine guns chattering like some demonic typewriter. And beneath it all, this wet thumping sound of bullets hitting flesh. I made it maybe 50 yards before I dove into a shell crater. Don't know how. Luck, maybe. Or lack of it. Depends on how you look at it. There were 3 other men in that crater when I landed. 2 were wounded. 1 was dead, but nobody had moved him yet. The dead one's eyes were open, staring at nothing. I remember thinking I should close them, but I never did. The wounded were screaming. 1 had taken shrapnel to his stomach. I could see. Christ, I could see inside him. He kept asking for his mum. 20 years old and calling for his mum. The other had lost his leg below the knee. Just gone. He was trying to tie it off with his puttees, but his hands were shaking too badly. I tried to help. Tried to remember the first aid training. But more men kept falling into the crater. Some wounded, some just seeking cover. Some already dead by the time they hit the bottom. The machine gun fire never stopped. Never. You could hear the bullets cracking overhead, thudding into the earth around us, hitting the bodies in no man's land with this wet, smacking sound. And the smell, cordite and blood and shit. When men die, everything lets go. Nobody tells you that. I looked over the lip of the crater. Mistake. Big mistake. But I had to see. Bodies everywhere. Hundreds of them just lying there. Some were still moving, crawling, trying to get back to our lines. Most weren't. The barbed wire, it wasn't cut at all. Men were tangled in it, hanging like scarecrows, and the machine guns were still firing into them, still firing into corpses. I saw Charlie Watson. He was maybe 20 feet away, caught in the wire. He was alive. He saw me, reached out his hand, called my name. I couldn't move. I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. But I couldn't move. He hung there for 3 hours before he stopped screaming. The man with the stomach wound died around noon. Just stopped making noise. The other one, the leg wound, he bled out maybe an hour later. We couldn't stop it. Didn't have the supplies. Didn't have the knowledge. We just watched him go pale. Watched him stop shivering. Watched him die. More waves came. We could hear the whistles blowing, could hear the officers shouting, could hear the machine guns start up again. Each time, more bodies fell. Each time, a few more made it to our crater or one nearby. By mid-afternoon, I was sharing that hole with 9 other men. 4 were wounded badly enough they probably wouldn't make it. 3 were what they called shell-shocked, just sitting there, rocking, not responding to anything. 1 kept laughing. High-pitched, horrible laughing. A shell landed close, maybe 10 feet away. The concussion felt like being punched by God. Everything went white and silent for a moment. When sound came back, it was muffled, like my head was underwater. Corporal Davies was trying to organize us, trying to get us ready to push forward again. We have to reach the German lines, he kept saying. We have to complete the objective. What objective? We'd lost half the battalion in the first hour. But you don't question, you don't think, you just exist. Jimmy Patterson found our crater around 4 o'clock. Sweet, quiet Jimmy from Scotland. Except he wasn't quiet anymore. He was covered in blood, not his own, he said. He'd made it further than most of us, actually reached the German wire. Saw men trying to cut through it with wire cutters while machine guns fired point blank. They're in bunkers, he kept saying. Deep bunkers. The shelling didn't touch them. They're all alive down there, just waiting for us. 7 days of bombardment, millions of shells. And they'd been safe the whole time, deep underground. We'd been fed to the machine guns for nothing. Night came eventually. It always does. though I wasn't sure it would that day. Time had stopped meaning much. We couldn't go forward, couldn't go back either. They'd shoot you for desertion. So we stayed in that crater as darkness fell, surrounded by the dead and dying. The groaning never stopped. All across no man's land, wounded men calling for help, calling for water, calling for their mothers. Some of the cries were in German. You learn to ignore it. You have to. The alternative is madness. We tried to retrieve some of the wounded after dark, crawled out into that nightmare landscape with stretchers. I helped carry back 3 men. 2 died before we reached our lines. The third, I don't know. They took him away and I never saw him again. I saw things out there I can't unsay, won't describe. Some images, once they're in your head, they never leave. They're with me now, sitting here in 1963, clear as photographs. Dawn came on July 2nd, and they sent us over again. Not all of us. There weren't enough left for that. But they needed to maintain pressure, they said. Exploit our gains, even though we hadn't gained anything but corpses. This time I made it maybe 70 yards. Different crater, same story. Machine guns, wire bodies. A few of us managed to get into a communication trench that had been partially destroyed. We held it for maybe 6 hours before German artillery forced us back. That became the pattern. Attack, fail, retreat. Attack, fail, retreat. Day after day after day. The battle didn't end on July 1st. That was just the worst day. It kept going, kept grinding us down. By July 4th, I didn't know most of the men in my unit. They were replacements for replacements. Fresh-faced boys who'd been training in England a week ago, now thrown into this charnel house. I stopped learning their names. Seemed pointless when they'd be dead by morning. The mud got worse as summer went on. Rain mixed with blood and chemicals and everything. It was knee-deep in places, and if you fell in, you might not get out. I saw a man drown in a shell crater full of muddy water, too wounded to stand. Took him 20 minutes to die. We lost Jimmy Patterson on July 14th. Sniper. He was eating a tin of bully beef when it happened. Just slumped over. Didn't even drop the tin. I didn't feel much by then. You couldn't. Feeling meant breaking, and if you broke, you were useless. So you became numb. You stopped being quite human. You became something else, something that could function in hell. The rats were everywhere, fat as cats, some of them. They fed well that summer. You'd wake up and find them on your chest, bold as brass. We tried to kill them, but there were always more. And the smell. People talk about the sound of war, but the smell, rotting flesh in summer heat. You can't wash it off. It gets into your clothes, your hair, your lungs. I can still smell it sometimes, even now. I don't remember the exact date. Late July, maybe early August. The days had blurred together into one long nightmare. We were holding a section of trench we'd taken, though taken makes it sound like we'd won something. Really, we'd just moved into a different slice of hell. The German trenches were as bad as ours. Worse, maybe. Bodies built into the walls where they'd fallen and couldn't be retrieved. You'd lean against the parapet and realize you were touching someone's hand. There was a boy there. Replacement. Couldn't have been more than 17, though he swore he was 19. Everyone lied about their age. His name was... God, what was his name? See, I told myself I wouldn't learn them, but you can't help it. You're human, even when you try not to be. Thomas, that was it, Tommy Ellis, from somewhere in Wales. He'd been there 2 days. We were on stand to at dawn when the shelling started. Not unusual. Both sides did morning hate, sending over shells to remind you they were still there. But this was heavier, sustained barrage. Tommy was next to me. He was shaking. Hell, we were all shaking. You never get used to it, no matter what people think. Each shell that lands close, you think, this is it. This is the one that's got my name on it. One landed short. maybe 15 feet from our position. The blast wave threw me against the trench wall. My ears were screaming. Couldn't hear anything but this high-pitched whine. When I could see again, Tommy was on the ground. He was still alive. But the shrapnel had... Christ, I can't... He was conscious, looking at me, trying to say something, but his jaw was... He couldn't speak, and I knew he wasn't going to make it. You learn to recognize that look. When there's too much damage and not enough time, the medics couldn't get to us. More shells coming in. So I sat with him, held his hand. This boy, this child who'd probably lied to the recruiting officer, dying in French mud thousands of miles from home. It took him 11 minutes to die. I counted. Don't know why. Maybe to give the moment weight, to make it mean something. When he finally went still, something in me... Broke isn't the right word. Broke implies there was something sudden. This was more like everything that had been holding me together just dissolved. I started laughing. Couldn't stop. High-pitched, hysterical laughing. The other men looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Sergeant Price slapped me. Hard. Get yourself together, soldier. But I couldn't. I just sat there in the mud next to Tommy's body and laughed until I cried, and then I just cried. Great heaving sobs, all the numbness, all the control I'd maintained for weeks, gone. They pulled me out of the line that day. Shell shock, they called it. Cowardice, some called it. Lack of moral fiber. They didn't understand. Still don't, most of them. I spent 2 weeks in a casualty clearing station. They did their best, I suppose. But you can't fix what war breaks. You can patch it, hide it, teach someone to function despite it. But you can't fix it. They sent me back to the line in late August, back to the Somme, because the battle was still going, still grinding men into paste for yards of worthless mud. The battle officially ended in November 1916, 4.5 months. Over 1 million casualties, British, French, German combined. And what did we gain? A few miles of devastated earth. Nothing strategic, nothing that mattered. I survived. That's what people say. You survived. You should be grateful. But did I? Did I really? I came home in 1919. My mother hugged me at the station, and I felt nothing. My father shook my hand, proud. My sister had made a cake. Everyone was celebrating. I couldn't tell them. How could I? How do you explain that you left part of yourself in French mud? That the boy who enlisted full of patriotic fervor died somewhere between the whistle and the wire, and what came back was just functioning, breathing, but not really alive. The nightmares started immediately. Still have them, 47 years later. I'm back in that crater. Charlie's reaching for me from the wire. Tommy's trying to speak through his ruined jaw. Jimmy's laughing, that horrible laugh. I wake up shouting, and my wife, God bless her, she tries to comfort me, but how can she understand? I tried to work, tried to be normal, got a job at a factory, married a good woman, had children, went through all the motions of living. But there's this distance, you see, like I'm watching my life through glass, like I'm not quite here. Loud noises, can't handle them. Car backfiring, door slamming. I'm back there instantly, on the ground, hands over my head, 20 years old again, and certain I'm about to die. The drink helps sometimes, quiets the ghosts, but it disappoints my family, so I try not to. Try to just endure. They had parades after the war, victory celebrations, medals and ceremonies. I went to one early on. They played patriotic music and made speeches about glory and sacrifice and defending civilization. I left halfway through, went home and drank myself unconscious. There was no glory, none. Just boys dying in mud, screaming for mothers who would never hear them. Just machine guns and gas and shells turning human beings into fertilizer. just officers sending wave after wave into proven death traps because they couldn't admit their strategy was murder. We were lions led by donkeys, they say. But we weren't lions. We were just boys. Scared boys who believed what we were told, who thought war would be adventure, who didn't understand that modern warfare had turned killing into an industrial process. I think about the ones who didn't make it. Charlie, Jimmy, Tommy, the thousands whose names I never learned. The ones who died on July 1st, the ones who died in the months after, the ones who made it home but couldn't live with what they'd seen and ate a bullet in some quiet room. Are they the lucky ones? Some days I think so. People ask me if I'm proud of my service, if I'd do it again. I don't know how to answer that. Proud? Of what? Of surviving while better men died? Of being part of the most pointless slaughter in human history? Of helping feed a generation into the meat grinder for generals' vanity and politicians' pride? We were told we were fighting for civilization, for freedom, to end all wars. Look around now, in 1963, look at what came after. Another war, worse than the first. Atomic bombs. The world divided and armed to the teeth. We didn't end war, we just paused it, caught our breath, and all those boys died for nothing. Sometimes young men approach me. They see the medals. I kept them, don't know why. And they get this look in their eyes. Admiration, romance. They ask what it was like. I tell them to pray they never find out. The Somme took everything from me that matters. My innocence, my faith in authority, my ability to feel properly, my friends, my youth, the person I might have been. I'm 66 years old now. I've lived nearly 50 years since that summer. But part of me is still there, still 19, still in that crater watching Charlie die, still counting the seconds as Tommy bleeds out, still hearing the guns that never stopped. The war ended in 1918. We celebrated. Armistice Day, they called it. But for us, for those of us who were at the Somme, at Ypres, at Passchendaele, at Verdun, the war never ended. It just moved inside us. We brought it home, carried it in our chests like shrapnel you can't remove. They say I survived the Battle of the Somme. They're wrong. I died there with the rest of them. What came back was just a ghost learning to pretend it was alive. We never came back. None of us. We're all still there. In the mud, in the wire, in the smoke. Still 19 years old. Still scared. Still dying. Always dying. That's the truth they don't put on the monuments.